Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his cargo ship watching the stars through the main window. The Endeavour was not a beautiful ship. She was old, dented, and made strange noises when she turned. But she was fast and reliable, which mattered more in the cargo business than looking pretty. Jake had been flying between human colonies and alien worlds for 12 years now. He knew the regular routes by heart. Today he was carrying medical supplies to the mining colony on Vega 7. It was boring work, but it paid well enough to keep his small crew happy. The communication screen suddenly lit up with a bright red emergency signal. Jake frowned and pressed the accept button. The face that appeared belonged to Admiral Lisa Carter, one of the senior officers in the human space fleet. "All ships, this is an emergency broadcast," Admiral Carter said. Her voice was calm but serious. "We have received a distress call from the Kepler 442 system. 12 billion people are in immediate danger." Jake felt his stomach drop. 12 billion was more people than lived on Earth. He had never heard of a disaster that big. Admiral Carter continued speaking. "A rogue neutron star has entered the Kepler 442 system. It will collide with the main star in 3 months. When that happens, all 4 planets in the system will be destroyed. Every living thing in that system will die unless we evacuate them." The Seer screen showed images of the 4 worlds. Jake recognized them from the news. Kepler 442b was a desert world where the lizard-like Zephyrians built their great stone cities. Kepler 442c was covered in oceans where the dolphin-like Delphinians lived in underwater cities. The gas giant Kepler 442d had floating mining platforms where the crystal people called silicoids worked. The ice world Kepler 442e was home to the cryophiles, who lived in cities carved from frozen gas. "The Galactic Coalition Council is meeting right now on Zerion Prime," Admiral Carter said. "All ship captains are ordered to stand by for further instructions." The screen went dark. Jake stared at it for a long moment. His crew members looked at him with worried faces. "Captain, what do you think will happen?" asked his engineer, a young woman named Amy Brooks. Jake shook his head. "I don't know. But 12 billion people." He could not finish the sentence. 2 days later, Jake found himself on Zerion Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Coalition. He had never been there before. The buildings were huge and made of materials that changed color in the light. Ships from dozens of different worlds filled the sky. The Coalition Council met in a giant dome that could hold thousands of beings. Jake sat in the small section reserved for human representatives. Around him sat aliens of every shape and size he could imagine. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of living metal. A few were just clouds of gas that somehow could think and speak. The meeting began with a presentation about the disaster. Scientists showed images of the neutron star racing toward Kepler 442. They explained how the gravity would tear apart the planets. They showed computer models of what would happen to every living thing in the system. Then came the requests for help. One by one, representatives from each world stood up to explain why they could not help with the evacuation. The Altarian ambassador was first. The Altarians were tall, proud beings who controlled a large empire. "We regret this tragedy," the ambassador said in a voice like music. "But our fleet is needed to protect our borders. Pirates have been attacking our trade routes. We cannot spare any ships." Next came the Cedian representative. The Cedians had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their ships were faster and more efficient than anyone else's. "Our evacuation vessels are currently undergoing essential maintenance," the Cedian said through a translator device. "It would take 6 months to prepare them for such a mission. We do not have that time." The Vegan Confederacy spoke next. The Vegans were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and long lives. Some of them were thousands of years old. "Our ancient laws forbid interference in cosmic events," their representative said sadly. "This neutron star collision is a natural occurrence. We cannot act against the will of the universe." One after another, every major power in the galaxy found reasons to avoid helping. The Regellians claimed their ships were too small. The Procyonites said their technology was not compatible with the aliens in Kepler 442. The Danubian Alliance, worried about the cost. Jake listened to excuse after excuse. He felt sick to his stomach. These were the great civilizations of the galaxy. They had technology that seemed like magic to humans. They had fleets of thousands of ships. They had resources beyond imagination, and they were all going to let 12 billion people die. Finally, the council president, a floating jellyfish-like being from Arcturus, spoke to the human section. Earth's representative will now present humanity's position on this crisis. Jake looked around. There was no official Earth representative present. The senior human diplomat had been delayed by engine trouble. Jake realized everyone was looking at him. He stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. Around him, thousands of alien beings waited to hear what he would say. He thought about the images of Kepler 442. He thought about the 12 billion people who would die if nobody helped them. "We'll handle it," Jake said. The words came out louder than he had intended. They echoed through the great dome. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the laughter started. It began as small chuckles from the Altarian section. The Cetians made clicking sounds that Jake knew meant amusement. Soon, beings throughout the dome were making whatever noise their species used for laughter. The council president raised a tentacle for silence. "The human representative appears to be joking," it said. "Humanity has fewer than 200 ships capable of interstellar travel. The human colonies have a total population of only 50 million. How could such a small, young civilization possibly evacuate 12 billion beings?" Jake felt his face turn red. He was not used to speaking in front of crowds, especially crowds of aliens who thought he was stupid. But he thought again about those 12 billion people waiting to die. "Because somebody has to," Jake said. "And apparently nobody else will." The dome fell silent again. This time nobody laughed. Jake sat down. His hands were shaking. Around him he could see aliens looking at each other with expressions he could not read. Some seemed confused. Others looked embarrassed. The council president floated higher above the crowd. "Very well," it said. "If humanity wishes to attempt this impossible task, the coalition will not stop you. This meeting is adjourned." As beings began filing out of the dome, Jake heard whispers in dozens of languages. Most of them sounded like they were talking about the crazy humans who thought they could save 12 billion people with 200 old ships. Jake pulled out his communication device and sent a message to Admiral Carter. "Council meeting complete. We're on our own. Beginning evacuation preparations immediately." He looked up at the dome's ceiling, where he could see stars through the transparent material. Somewhere out there, 12 billion people were living their normal lives, not knowing that their worlds would be destroyed in 3 months. Jake Morrison was just a cargo ship captain. He had never been a hero or done anything particularly brave. But as he walked out of that dome, he knew that everything was about to change. Humanity was about to attempt the largest rescue mission in galactic history, and nobody thought they could do it. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of the Pioneer, staring at the massive display screen that showed every human ship in known space. Red dots marked their locations across dozens of star systems. In the past 6 hours, something amazing had started happening. Every single red dot was moving toward Kepler 442. Carter had sent out the call immediately after Jake Morrison's declaration at the Coalition Council. She expected maybe 30 or 40 ships to respond. Cargo haulers looking for emergency pay, maybe a few military vessels following orders. She never expected this. "Admiral, we're getting response signals from everywhere," said Lieutenant Pete Johnson, her communications officer. "The mining ship Iron Duke just dumped 2 million credits worth of rare metals to make room for passengers. The colony transport New Horizon changed course from the Centauri expansion project. Even private family ships are volunteering." Carter watched the dots converge on her screen. Each dot represented a ship full of humans who had decided that saving alien lives was more important than their current missions, their profits, or their safety. "How many ships total?" she asked. Johnson checked his display. 187 confirmed. More are still reporting in. Carter felt a strange mix of pride and terror. Humanity was about to attempt something that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had declared impossible. They were going to try to save 12 billion lives with less than 200 ships. "Get me Dr. Kevin Walsh," she ordered. Dr. Walsh appeared on the communication screen a few minutes later. He looked tired and worried. Behind him, Carter could see his laboratory on Earth's orbital research station. Normally, the lab was organized and clean. Now it looked like a war zone with equipment scattered everywhere and assistants running back and forth. "Admiral, I've been working on the life support problem since your message came in," Walsh said without waiting for her to speak. "It's bad, really bad." "Explain it to me in simple terms, Doctor." Walsh held up a small device that looked like a breathing mask. "This is what humans need to stay alive in space. We need oxygen at specific pressure levels. We need temperatures between 60 and 80 degrees. We need gravity close to Earth normal." He put the mask down and picked up 3 other devices that looked completely different. The Zephyrians breathe a nitrogen-sulfur mix at twice Earth pressure. The Delphinians need water-saturated air with specific salt content. The Silicoids require electromagnetic fields to maintain their crystal structure. And the cryophiles need temperatures that would freeze human blood solid. Carter understood the problem immediately. "Our ships can't keep them alive." "Not as currently designed," Walsh confirmed. "I need to completely rebuild our life support systems in 72 hours. It should take 6 months minimum." "What do you need from me?" Walsh was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Permission to strip every piece of non-essential equipment from every ship in the fleet. Medical research devices, scientific instruments, luxury items, personal belongings, everything. I need the space and the power." Carter thought about what he was asking. The human fleet would become flying boxes with basic life support, and nothing else. No comforts, no backup systems, no safety margins. "You have it," she said. "Send the specifications to all ship captains immediately." The next 12 hours were chaos. Across human space, ship crews worked without sleep to rebuild their vessels. Carter watched reports come in from dozens of ships. Captain Morrison on the Endeavour had torn out his cargo processing equipment to install sulfur scrubbers for Zephyrian passengers. His crew was welding together breathing apparatus by hand, following Dr. Walsh's hastily drawn plans. The passenger liner Starlight had flooded 3 of its decks with seawater for Delphinian refugees. The captain reported that his ship now handled like a wounded whale, but the water systems were holding. Engineer Amy Brooks was working on the cargo hauler Freedom. She had stripped out the ship's entertainment systems, the crew recreation areas, and even half the sleeping quarters to make room for electromagnetic field generators. Her ship would be flying blind through space using only basic navigation, but it could keep Silicoids alive. The most difficult challenge came from the ice world. Commander Johnson, who had volunteered to coordinate the cryophile evacuation, was trying to turn his exploration ship into a flying freezer. The temperatures required would kill any human who entered the passenger areas without a full environmental suit. "Admiral, I'm getting some complaints from the crews," reported Lieutenant Johnson. "Some of the captains are asking if this is really possible. They're scared." Carter understood their fear. She was scared too. But she thought about Jake Morrison standing up in that council chamber, making a promise that seemed impossible to keep. "Patch me through to all ships," she ordered. When the communication system was ready, Carter spoke to every human in the rescue fleet. "This is Admiral Carter. I know what we're attempting seems impossible. I know our ships weren't designed for this. I know we're taking risks that could kill us all." She paused, looking at the display showing all those red dots moving toward disaster. "But right now, 12 billion people are going about their normal lives. They're working, playing with their children, falling in love, having dinner with their families. They don't know that in 3 months everything they've ever known will be destroyed." The communication channel was completely silent. Carter knew that hundreds of humans across dozens of ships were listening to her words. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy have decided those 12 billion lives aren't worth the risk. They have better ships than us, better technology, more resources, and they've all found reasons to do nothing. Carter's voice grew stronger. But we're not like them. We've never been like them. When someone needs help, humans don't calculate the odds or worry about the cost. We just help. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. She looked at the tactical display showing the neutron star's approach to Kepler 442. In 60 hours, we'll reach the first evacuation point. We have 72 hours to save 12 billion lives. It's impossible. Everyone says so. Maybe they're right. Carter smiled, even though no one could see her. But I'd rather try and fail than live knowing we didn't try at all. Morrison was right. Somebody has to answer the call. And that somebody is us. When she ended the transmission, Lieutenant Johnson looked at her with wide eyes. Admiral, you really think we can do this? Carter watched the red dots on her screen, each representing humans who had abandoned their normal lives to attempt something that might be impossible. I don't know, Lieutenant, but I know we're going to try. And that's more than anyone else in the galaxy can say. In the depths of space, nearly 200 human ships raced toward a dying solar system. Their crews worked frantically to prepare for the largest rescue mission in galactic history. They had no idea if their improvised life support systems would work. They had no backup plan if things went wrong. They had no guarantee that they would survive. But they kept flying toward Kepler 442 because somewhere in that doomed system, 12 billion people needed help. And when disaster struck, only the humans had answered the call. Captain Jake Morrison felt the Endeavour shake as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the bridge windows, he could see the Kepler 442 system spread out before them. What he saw made his stomach turn cold. The neutron star was already visible, a tiny point of impossible brightness that hurt to look at directly. Its gravity was pulling at everything in the system. The 4 planets were no longer in their normal orbits. Instead, they wobbled and lurched through space, like drunken dancers. Captain, I'm reading massive seismic activity on all 4 worlds, reported Amy Brooks from her engineering station. The desert world is getting hit the worst. Morrison looked at the tactical display. Kepler 442b, the home of the Zephyrians, was shaking itself apart. The proud stone cities that had stood for thousands of years were crumbling into dust. Take us down to the largest city, Morrison ordered. Let's see if we can find someone in charge. The Endeavour descended through the planet's atmosphere. Morrison had visited Zephyrian worlds before, but he had never seen anything like this. Huge cracks split the ground for miles in every direction. Ancient towers that had reached toward the sky now lay in broken pieces. The air was full of dust and smoke. They landed near what had once been the capital city's spaceport. Now it was just a field of rubble with a few landing pads still intact. Morrison suited up and walked outside with his translator device. A group of Zephyrian officials waited for him. The Zephyrians looked like upright lizards with tough scales and bright golden eyes. Normally they stood tall and proud. Now they huddled together, fear clear on their reptilian faces. You are the human rescue mission? Asked the leader, an elderly Zephyrian with gray scales. We received word that you were coming, but we did not believe it. We're here to get you out, Morrison said simply. How many people live in this city? 300,000 in the city itself, perhaps 2 million in the surrounding areas. The elder's voice was bitter. The Altarians promised us aid if disaster ever struck our world. The Cedians signed mutual defense treaties with us. Where are they now? Morrison didn't answer the question. He had seen the coalition meeting. He knew exactly where those species were right now, safe in their own territory, finding excuses not to help. We can take about 3,000 people per ship, Morrison said. Children and elderly first. Can you organize the evacuation? The elder stared at him. You have how many ships? Just 1 here in the city, but there are more coming. 1 ship? The elder's voice rose. 1 human ship for 2 million people? Morrison understood the elder's fear. The math was simple and terrible. Even if every human ship worked perfectly, they could not save everyone. But that didn't mean they shouldn't try to save who they could. We'll make multiple trips if we have to, Morrison said. But right now, I need you to start getting people ready to leave. The elder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Our laws forbid accepting help from species we consider inferior. You humans are barely 2 centuries into space travel. We have been building cities among the stars for 5,000 years." Morrison felt anger flash through him. 2 million people were about to die, and this alien was worried about his species' pride. "Your laws can survive," Morrison said, repeating words he had heard himself say in a dream. "Your people can't." While the elder was still thinking about this, Morrison walked over to a group of young Zephyrians who were crying in fear. Without asking permission, he started leading them toward his ship. "What are you doing?" the elder demanded. "Loading passengers," Morrison replied. "Starting with the kids." The elder started to protest, but then another earthquake shook the ground. A nearby building collapsed with a thunderous crash. When the dust settled, the elder looked at Morrison with new understanding. "Very well," the elder said quietly. "We will accept your help." Meanwhile, Admiral Carter was dealing with her own crisis above the ocean world. The Delphinians lived in great cities on the sea floor, connected by tubes and tunnels that stretched for hundreds of miles. Now those cities were being torn apart by impossible tidal forces. The ocean itself was acting crazy. Waves as tall as mountains crashed against each other from different directions. The water level was rising and falling by hundreds of feet every few minutes as the neutron star's gravity played with the planet's seas. "Admiral, the Delphinians are afraid to leave their cities," reported Dr. Walsh over the communication system. "They've never been out of water before. They think our ships will kill them." Carter looked at her modified ship. Following Walsh's instructions, she had flooded 3 cargo decks with seawater. Her ship was now part submarine, part spacecraft. It was incredibly dangerous. If the walls between the water sections and the rest of the ship failed, everyone would drown. "Can the water sections hold during takeoff?" she asked her engineer. "Maybe," came the uncertain reply. "We've never tried anything like this before." Carter made her decision. "Take us down to the largest underwater city we're going in." The Pioneer dove beneath the chaotic waves. Carter had never tried to pilot a spacecraft underwater before. The ship groaned and creaked as water pressure pushed against the hull. Warning lights flashed on panels throughout the bridge. They found the Delphinian city at the bottom of a deep trench. The dolphin-like beings swam in panicked circles around their collapsing homes. Carter opened a communication channel using the underwater frequency. "This is Admiral Carter of the Human Rescue Fleet," she said. "We're here to evacuate your people." A Delphinian leader responded, its voice translated into human speech by the communication system. "Human ship, your presence here is impossible. How do you survive in our environment?" "We brought the ocean with us," Carter replied. "We have room for 15,000 of your people in our water sections." There was silence on the communication channel. Then the Delphinian leader said, "You flooded your ship for us? Why would you risk your lives in such a way?" Carter thought about the question. Why were humans willing to flood their ships, strip their equipment, and risk everything for aliens they had never met? She didn't have a good answer, except the obvious one. "Because you need help," she said simply. As the first Delphinian refugees swam into the Pioneer's flooded cargo holds, Carter realized something important. The other species in the galaxy had advanced technology and powerful fleets, but they had forgotten something crucial. They had forgotten that sometimes the right thing to do was also the most dangerous thing to do. Humans had never forgotten that lesson. And now, in the dying light of a doomed solar system, that difference might be enough to save 12 billion lives. The evacuation had begun. The artificial gravity on the Endeavour failed at the worst possible moment. Captain Morrison was in the middle of loading 3,000 Zephyrian refugees when every person and object on the ship suddenly started floating in zero gravity. The Zephyrians immediately began to panic. Their reptilian bodies were not built for weightlessness. They spun helplessly through the air, crashing into walls and each other. Some started vomiting, which was dangerous in zero gravity because the liquid could float into their breathing passages. "Amy, what happened to the gravity?" Morrison shouted into his communication device while trying to catch a floating Zephyrian child. "The gravity generator overloaded. Amy Brooks reported from the engine room. "We're carrying 10 times more weight than this ship was designed for. The system just can't handle it." Morrison looked around the chaos in his cargo hold. Zephyrians were screaming in their own language. Some were trying to climb the walls. Others had curled up into balls and were floating motionless, too terrified to move. "How long to fix it?" Morrison asked. 6 hours minimum," Amy replied. "And that's if I can find replacement parts." Morrison realized they didn't have 6 hours. The neutron star's gravity was getting stronger every minute. They needed to leave the planet's surface soon, or they would be trapped forever. "Amy, can you put the ship into a spin?" Morrison asked. "A spin?" "Captain, that's incredibly dangerous with this many passengers aboard. More dangerous than staying here while the planet tears itself apart?" Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll need to do it manually. If I get the rotation speed wrong, the ship will break apart from the stress." "Do it," Morrison ordered. Morrison grabbed the ship's internal communication system and tried to explain to the panicking Zephyrians what was about to happen. Most of them didn't understand, but the elder who had initially refused human help floated over to Morrison. "You are going to spin the entire ship?" the elder asked. "It's the only way to create artificial gravity without the proper equipment," Morrison explained. "But if we spin too fast, the ship will be torn apart. Too slow, and you'll all stay sick." The elder looked around at his people floating helplessly in the air. "And if this fails, we all die together." "Yes," Morrison said honestly. The elder nodded slowly. "Then we trust you with our lives, human captain." Amy began the spin slowly. Morrison felt a slight pulling sensation as the ship started to rotate. Gradually, the Zephyrians began to settle toward the outer walls of the cargo hold. The spinning motion created the feeling of gravity through centrifugal force. But Morrison could hear the ship's hull creaking under the stress. Warning lights flashed on every control panel. The Endeavour was not built for this kind of operation. "Amy, how are we doing?" Morrison asked. "Hull stress is at 90% of maximum," Amy reported. "But the passengers should feel normal gravity now." Morrison looked around the cargo hold. The Zephyrians were standing up, looking confused but relieved. The elder walked over to Morrison. With careful steps. "You risk destroying your ship to keep us comfortable," the elder said. "Why?" Morrison thought about the question while checking the ship's status displays. "Because you're passengers on my ship. That makes you my responsibility." Meanwhile, Admiral Carter was facing her own crisis aboard the Pioneer. The water-filled cargo sections that kept the Delphinian refugees alive were starting to leak. Seawater was dripping into the ship's electrical systems, causing random power failures throughout the vessel. "Admiral, we're losing life support in sections 4 and 5, reported Lieutenant Johnson. "If the water reaches the main power grid, we'll lose everything." Carter looked at the engineering reports. The hasty modifications to her ship were failing under the stress of space travel. She had 15,000 Delphinian refugees in the flooded sections, and no way to move them to safety. Several of her human crew members approached her with worried expressions. "Admiral, we need to pump out the water sections," said Chief Engineer Martinez. "If we don't, we're all going to die when the electrical systems fail completely." "That would kill every Delphinian on board," Carter replied. "Better than killing everyone, Admiral. We have families back home, too." Carter understood their fear. The logical choice was to save the human crew and let the alien refugees die. But she thought about the Delphinian families swimming in her cargo holds, trusting humans to keep them safe. "Martinez, get me a full environmental suit," Carter ordered. "Admiral, what are you planning?" "I'm going into the flooded sections to fix the leaks myself," Carter said. "If the water reaches our main systems, we'll reroute power around the damaged areas." Martinez stared at her. "Admiral, that's suicide. One small tear in your suit and you'll drown." Carter was already putting on the environmental suit. "Then make sure my suit doesn't tear." She spent the next 4 hours working in the flooded cargo sections, welding underwater repairs while Delphinian refugees swam around her. Every few minutes, another electrical system would fail, and she would have to swim through freezing water. To fix it, The Delphinians watched her work with growing amazement. They had never seen an air-breathing creature willingly enter their environment before. When one of the younger Delphinians tried to help her carry tools, Carter realized something important was happening. She was not just saving their lives. She was showing them that different species could work together, even in impossible conditions. On the gas giant's mining platforms, engineer Amy Brooks was having different problems. The silicoids were beings made of living crystal who needed specific electromagnetic fields to survive, but those same fields were interfering with her ship's navigation systems. Flying blind through the chaotic gravity fields around the gas giant, Brooks had to navigate by looking out the windows and guessing where the safe paths were. She stayed, awake for 60 straight hours, manually piloting her ship while the silicoid refugees created electrical storms in her cargo holds. "Why do you not sleep?" asked one of the silicoids through the translation system. "Your biological form requires rest." Brooks rubbed her burning eyes and adjusted the ship's course to avoid a floating piece of debris. "Because if I sleep, we all die." "This makes no logical sense," the silicoid replied. "You could save yourself by ejecting our life support systems." Brooks looked at the creature made of living diamond and electricity. "Maybe it doesn't make logical sense, but it makes human sense." As the evacuation continued, word of humanity's efforts began spreading throughout the galaxy. Coalition species that had refused to help were now watching in amazement as human ships performed impossible rescues. Ships that should have been destroyed were somehow staying together through determination and improvised repairs. But the neutron star was getting closer. The gravitational effects were getting stronger, and the human fleet was running out of time to save everyone. In the depths of space, nearly 200 human ships worked frantically to evacuate 12 billion people. Their crews pushed themselves beyond exhaustion, their ships beyond safe limits, and their technology beyond its design parameters. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. The neutron star's final approach turned space itself into a nightmare. Captain Morrison watched his instruments go crazy as gravity waves twisted reality around the Endeavor. Stars appeared to bend and stretch. His ship's hull groaned under forces that should have crushed it like an empty can. "Amy, how are the engines holding up?" Morrison asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "They're not," Amy Brooks replied from the engine room. "We just lost main power. Emergency power won't last more than an hour." Morrison looked at the 3,000 Zephyrian refugees packed into his cargo holds. They had trusted him to get them to safety. Now his ship was dead in space, caught in the outer edge of the neutron star's gravity well. "Captain," said the Zephyrian elder, walking onto the bridge without being invited, "your crew is preparing the escape pods. They want you to abandon ship." Morrison nodded. "That's the smart thing to do. The pods can reach the other human ships. But if you leave, we will die. Your life support systems will fail without someone to maintain them." Morrison looked at the old reptilian being. In the past few days, this alien had gone from considering humans inferior to trusting them with his people's lives. "Yes, you'll die." The elder was quiet for a moment. "At the Coalition Council, we laughed when you said humanity would handle this crisis. We thought you were fools. Why do you do this for us?" Morrison thought about all the easy answers he could give. He could talk about duty or honor or the right thing to do. Instead, he gave the simplest answer of all. Because someone has to. Because you need help. Because it's what humans do. The elder stared at him. "Your species is very strange." "Yeah," Morrison agreed. "We get that a lot." Morrison's crew gathered around him, their faces grim. They all knew the situation. The escape pods could save the humans, but someone had to stay behind to keep the Zephyrians alive until rescue came. "I'm staying," Morrison announced. "The rest of you take the pods." "Captain, that's suicide," Amy protested. "You can't maintain life support for 3,000 people by yourself." "Maybe not, but I have to try." Amy looked at the other crew members. Then she shook her head. "If you're staying, we're staying. This is our ship. These are our passengers." Morrison felt pride and terror in equal measure. His crew was volunteering to die with him rather than abandon the refugees. It was the most human thing he had ever witnessed. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life. "Endeavor, this is Admiral Carter on the Pioneer. We're coming to get you." Morrison looked at his displays. Carter's ship was badly damaged from her underwater rescue operations. Half her systems were flooded. Her hull showed stress fractures from the gravitational forces. "Admiral, you can't dock with us," Morrison replied. "The gravity fields will tear both ships apart." "Then we'll have to do something crazy," Carter's voice came back. Morrison watched through his windows as the Pioneer approached. Carter was flying her ship like a fighter pilot, diving and twisting through the chaotic gravity fields. She brought her ship alongside the Endeavor and somehow managed to match its spinning motion. "Docking tubes won't work in this gravity," Carter reported. "We're going to have to transfer passengers through space." It was an insane plan. Moving 3,000 refugees from one ship to another, while both vessels spun through twisted space-time, should have been impossible. But Morrison's crew immediately began suiting up the Zephyrians in emergency gear. The transfer took 6 hours. One by one, Zephyrian refugees jumped through space from the dying Endeavor to the Pioneer. Some missed the target and had to be caught by human crew members in maneuvering units. Others panicked halfway across and nearly drifted away into the gravity storm. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. Every single Zephyrian made it safely to Carter's ship. Morrison was the last to transfer. As he prepared to jump, the Zephyrian elder grabbed his arm. "Human captain," the elder said, "I will tell my people what happened here. I will tell them that when the galaxy abandoned us, humans risked everything to save us. This will not be forgotten." Morrison nodded and jumped across the gap between ships. Behind him, the Endeavor finally succumbed to the gravitational forces and broke apart. But its crew and passengers were safe. All across the Kepler 442 system, similar scenes played out. Human ships pushed beyond their limits, rescued alien refugees that should have been impossible to save. The crystal beings from the gas giant platforms, the ice dwellers from the frozen outer world, millions of lives saved by crews who refused to give up. When the neutron star finally collided with Kepler 442's sun, the human fleet was already light years away. They had done the impossible. 11.7 billion beings had been evacuated from certain death. The cost was severe. 40 human ships lost, thousands of human lives sacrificed. But they had saved an entire civilization. The rescued populations were taken to coalition worlds that suddenly discovered they had room for refugees after all. The Altarians offered their best planets to the Zephyrians. The Cetians shared their technology to help rebuild Delphinian cities. The Vegans changed their ancient laws to allow future humanitarian missions. 6 months later, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Endeavor II. It was a gift from the grateful Zephyrian government, built with both human and alien technology. Through his windows, he could see the orbital city of New Kepler, where refugees from the destroyed system were building new homes. His communication system chimed with an incoming message. The face that appeared belonged to the Zephyrian elder, who had stood with him during those final desperate hours. "Captain Morrison," the elder said, "I have news from the Coalition Council. They have established new emergency response protocols. When disasters strike, the first ships dispatched will always be human vessels." Morrison smiled. "Why is that?" "Because the galaxy has learned what it means to be human," the elder replied. "We have all learned that some things are more important than politics or profit or even survival. We have learned that true civilization is not about having the best technology or the strongest military. It is about answering the call when others need help." The elder paused, then continued. "When disaster struck Kepler 442, every great power in the galaxy found reasons to look away. Only humanity answered the call. You showed us what we should have been all along." Morrison looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, 12 billion beings lived because humans had decided that doing the right thing was more important than doing the safe thing. "Elder," Morrison said, "we just did what anyone should do." "No, Captain," the elder replied. "You did what only humans would do, and the galaxy is better for it." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with his thoughts. Outside his window, the stars shone with the same light they always had. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy now knew that when disaster struck, when the great powers turned away, when all hope seemed lost, there was one species that would always answer the call. Humanity had reminded the universe what it truly meant to be civilized.